greenhouse effect occurs when energy from the sun reaches the surface of the earth, warming the surface of the earth. Much of the heat that is brought about by the arrival of this energy radiates back from the surface of the earth towards space. It doesn't go into space, though. It's prevented from doing so because of this layer of gases that surrounds the earth. This layer of gases includes gases such as water, obviously in a gaseous form, CO2, and some other gases as well. But these gases collectively are referred to as greenhouse gases, and they form a blanket that surrounds the earth and actually warms it. Interestingly, this is overall a good occurrence for the earth. Without this layer of greenhouse gases surrounding the earth, life on earth would not exist, at least as we know it. The earth would be a very frigid and cold place. It would be too cold all year round for plants to grow, and certainly animals wouldn't exist on the face of the earth. Perhaps microorganisms would, but greenhouse gases maintain life on earth as we know it. Interestingly, simply by creating this blanket that allows energy from the sun to come in the form of light, but then once that light strikes the earth, it warms the earth, and the heat that comes back up off the earth has a much more difficult time making its way through that layer of gases, and hence this idea of the greenhouse effect. So the greenhouse effect is a natural process and supports life as we know it on the face of the earth. In recent years, however, we have seen two things. We've seen an increase in one of these greenhouse gases, and we have seen an increase in overall temperature on the face of the earth. Now, it would be disingenuous to suggest here that there are not varying opinions on this idea of global warming, but our goal in this chapter is to give you the facts that you need to evaluate the different arguments and come to a decision based on the information that you see. So the idea of global warming is this. It's best illustrated on this particular slide. If we look back over the past 1,000 years, which is what we see depicted on these two graphs, and we look at two things, this is what we see. We see in very recent years, now we should make that very clear, in very recent years an increase in the temperature on the face of the earth. And so you can see that in the past approximately 60, 70 years or so, we see that this increase in global temperatures. And that correlates pretty nicely with the graph that we see on the bottom, an increase in CO2 concentrations that are found in our atmosphere. In other words, that one portion of the greenhouse gases, the one greenhouse gas, CO2, has increased in recent years. CO2 is not the most important greenhouse gas, but it's the one that humans have had the most impact on in the past 60 or 70 years at this particular point. And so we'll talk more about why that is a little bit later in our chapter. It may be obvious to you at this point. We can go ahead and say that it was the invention of the combustion engine and the fossil fuels that are needed to run a combustion engine that led to this increase in CO2 concentrations. So there are lots of controversial aspects to global warming, but what we see on the screen is difficult to argue with. This is fairly recent data and well documented, and so we do see this increase in CO2 concentrations and increase in temperature in the past 50 or 60 years. Now I encourage you to go on to the next lecture following this and learn about the carbon cycle itself, but we'll give a little bit of introductory information to that cycle at this particular point. So atmospheric carbon dioxide concentrations are higher now, as far as we can tell, than they've been in 700,000 years. And so you can see at least 1,000 of those years on the graph that we just looked at. The carbon cycle then is this process that takes carbon from one form to another here on the face of the earth. Carbon, as you learned about in our earlier chapters, is a very important atom, and it's a very important part of biological molecules. And so the movement of carbon from one part of the atmosphere to the other is very important to all living things, animals and plants, because they are mostly composed of carbon.